Hello, it's Ben with the DIY Homefront, and today I'm playing electronics repairman. My wife's iPhone 10 has got to the point where the battery doesn't hold a charge. So for $22, we're going to replace the battery instead of spending a couple hundred to buy a new phone. Let's get to it. The first thing we're going to need to do is create a workspace. I'm going to need a computer because I'm going to look up some stuff, a work surface, got some tools, and of course the phone. If you're tackling a project you don't do very often, it never hurts to have your computer out with some information available in case you need it. I've already got mine on a video of somebody else swapping out a battery, just in case I need to refresh my memory on where things go. So I'm going to put a few marks on this piece of paper so I can make sure I got the phone where the camera is pointed, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove the cover from it. Before you pull out the memory card or take the phone apart, you need to make sure you turn the power off. And this phone was a little bit different than mine, so it took me a second, but the power is off. So the next thing to do is to take this battery kit out, open it up and see what's inside. And I'll put information about this product in the video description below. So the first thing I came across was a replacement seal for the glass, and that'll keep water out. Then there was a pick, a suction cup, a few tools in a small bag, and then a pry bar and a screwdriver, along with some tweezers and that replacement battery. And now it's time to start disassembling the phone. There's two really small screws on this end of the iPhone, and it takes a special bit that's got 5 points on it. And this kit came with one of those 5-point bits, and the bit is currently in the screwdriver that I'm turning. Make sure you've got a bowl, a dish, or a certain spot that you're going to put all the hardware that you're taking off, like the screws and the SIM card, in. So that way when it's time to put this iPhone back together, you've got all the hardware to do it. And there really are some really small screws that we'll be taking out, and we're going to need to keep up with all of them. So after we get these two screws out of the bottom of the iPhone, we'll move on to the SIM card. And that gets removed by pushing in on a little dot on the side of the phone. I pushed the pin in using the same screwdriver, but I couldn't get the SIM card holder to eject. So I had to go back with a pair of tweezers and use that. And once I used the tweezers, I was able to pop the SIM card all the way out. The next job is by far the hardest job, and that's going to be to get the glass off of this iPhone. Now I've got a suction cup that came with the kit that you stick on the glass, and then there's a pry bar that they suggest using that you slowly work your way around the glass. And you really need to be slow and careful with this, because what will happen is you'll just shatter the glass if you're too aggressive. I probably spent about 10 minutes getting the glass off, very carefully going around the sides. And there was more than once when I thought I was using way too much pressure to get the job done. While I continue working on the glass, I'll let you know how I chose my battery. I went to Amazon.com and chose one that had a lot of positive reviews that was in the middle of the price range. In other words, it wasn't the cheapest or most expensive, but it was one that was in the middle with a lot of reviews that said this was a decent battery. And the battery I chose was 4,900 milliamps, and it was considered a high capacity for this iPhone 10. During my research, what I found out is that a lot of times they will take old batteries and just resell them as new, which is why you wouldn't want to buy the cheapest battery you can find on Amazon. And you want one that has a lot of product reviews, so you know you have a reputable company that you're buying it from. Out of all the tools I was using, this small plastic piece, which is shaped like a guitar pick, seemed to work the best for me. And you can see I accidentally turned the phone back on with all the handling. The reason why it's so hard to get the glass off is because there's a little waterproof gasket that goes all the way around it that's sticky on both sides, so it's literally holding the glass onto the iPhone. But if you try to be patient and go slow and pry carefully, eventually you can separate the glass from the rest of the iPhone, and that'll let you get to where the battery is so we can change it out. To get the battery out, we're going to have to unplug a ribbon cable. And to unplug that ribbon cable, we're going to have to take a metal plate off. And that's what I'm doing right now. And there's 5 screws that go into this metal plate. I put some numbers on the side of my piece of paper, and I'll put the screws on top of those numbers as I take them out, so I make sure I've got the screws in the right spot when they go back in, because some of them might be different lengths. With the last screw out, you can use a pair of tweezers and pry up that metal plate that holds the ribbon cables in place. I used the prying tool in the kit to very carefully pry up all the ribbon cables. Now, you don't need to do every one, but I wasn't sure which ones would need to come out, so I just very carefully unplugged all of them. And you do that by carefully prying up on the corner. I disconnected the ribbon cable that went to the display, but I couldn't pull it loose because it looks like the battery's on top of it. So I'm going to need to take the battery out before I can get this last ribbon cable out of the way. So the battery is held in place with double-sided sticky tape. And just like the display, it's going to take quite a bit of prying to get it out. Even though this battery is pretty much dead, I still don't want to poke into it with my tweezers because the materials these batteries are made out of are extremely flammable. And once a fire gets started, they're extremely difficult to put out, even a small battery like this. Now that I've got this end of the battery up and out of the way, I can work on getting that ribbon cable removed so I can actually separate the 2 halves. And as I separate these 2 halves, you can see how there's a stringy material between them, and that's actually the seal that makes it waterproof. We're going to have to peel that off all the way around the edge so that we can put the new seal back in place before we put this together. It took quite a few minutes to get that seal off of both sides, but once I did, it was time to remove the battery. Well, like I said, the battery is held in place with double-sided sticky tape, and it does its job holding it in place. I struggled trying to pull it out with just my hand and ended up having to use the tweezers as a pry bar again. But eventually I got the battery and all that double-sided tape out. At this point, I went back and reattached a few of the ribbon cables before I went to the new packaging and worked on getting that seal in place. The seal is protected on both sides by a blue piece of plastic because it's sticky. And what you'll want to do is pull back the blue plastic on one side, position it where it needs to go, and then press it down. Once you feel like you've got the seal in position, gently push the seal down onto the case of the iPhone. I went back with my tweezers and gently applied pressure all the way around to make sure that the sticky part of that seal really was touching the metal portion of the case. The new replacement battery had double-sided sticky tape attached to the back of it, but I had to be really careful pulling off the protective film because it was wanting to pull the sticky tape off too. So now that I've got the battery ready, it's time to go ahead and peel off this other piece of film that's protecting the seal. I didn't do this earlier because I wanted to preserve the sticky part of that seal. Now there's only one ribbon cable on the battery that gets connected. So I decided I might be better off trying to line up the ribbon cable first and then push in the battery down next. You really only have one try getting this battery in place because that double-sided tape really holds it in place once you put it down. It was a little bit of a struggle, mainly just because the connector is so small. But eventually I got the battery plugged back into the connector. Now we're just going to start doing everything in reverse. I'll take the display of the iPhone and set it next to the back of the iPhone. And then I can use my tweezers to plug in the iPhone's display connector. These connectors are really small and they're very difficult to get attached. I ended up wearing a different pair of glasses with a stronger magnification so I could see what I was doing. But even with the magnification glasses, I still struggled. I also had to go back and put several of the connectors back on once I finished because I had knocked them loose or they had popped off on their own. You really need that metal plate on top of all these connectors to hold them securely in place. After double checking all the connectors are secure, it's time for that metal plate. I was able to get the metal plate in place, but I struggled trying to hold the display up and being able to put the screws in. So I got my wife's help, and she held up the display while I put in the screws. But 5 screws later, that task was done. Well, for the most part, that's it. The only task that's left to do would be to push the top half of the display onto the lower portion of the phone case, making sure that that gasket or seal that's sticky makes a good contact. But I wanted to make sure that I had gotten all the connections correct, so I went ahead and powered up the phone before I did that, because I knew I would struggle taking it back apart if I didn't get it right. Once I did a very preliminary check to make sure that the power came on, I went ahead and pushed the top and the bottom of the case together, going around the outside edges quite a few times. Now, I know the phone's not technically waterproof, but I wanted to make sure that if my wife was out in the rain or something like that, that at least it would be able to handle a little bit of moisture getting on it without water getting inside and messing it up. There's almost like a latch at the top of the phone case, but the bottom is held securely in by 2 screws, and I'm going to put those in now. I'll power the phone down again before I put in the SIM card. But after the SIM card is installed, this job is complete. We can put it on the charger and charge it up, and then my wife can give us a report on whether or not the new phone battery really helped. All right, well, there you have it. That was not too difficult. Like I said, it never hurts to have some information available, and that's what the laptop was for. Well, from the DIY Homestead and the Electronics Department, this has been saying, so like and subscribe, check out my playlist, and I'll see you in who knows what kind of video next.